challenges that COVID-19 is putting in our faces. And I want to be here with health tips for you. And I want to answer your questions. And I'm bringing in people who can help us to live healthier. We're going to do the best we can, and we're going to do pretty darn good during this crisis, and we'll be even better, all of us, when this thing is over. So first of all, some of the rules. I want you to feel free to type in questions. Put your name in at the end of the questions if you have something for Stacey. And we're just going to talk about things that we think are on people's minds. So I want to introduce to you Stacey Rose, LCSW, and you also have a doctorate in education, as I believe. So Stacey is a relationship expert, a relationship counselor. She has an office here in Ocean Township, and I've known Stacey for about 20 years, and I have found her to be an incredible resource. And Stacey, some of the talk I've been hearing has been from people who are, shall we say, a little bit stressed out about being with a or several significant others, meaning spouses and offspring. Tell us first about what happens to us when we're faced with a crisis. What happens to our minds? What we think is an existential threat. Go ahead. Yep.
For couples who are relatively happy and stable, and now they've been sequestered to spend way more time with each other at home, they seem to be faring well, at least many of the couples that I'm talking to. They respect each other's space in the house. They spend enough time individually, enough quality time, enough time with the kids. There's somewhat of a balance. So those are the couples that were doing well, we could say, pre-corona. Mm-hmm. Since the onset of this, the couples that were struggling pre-corona are really struggling even more, I've found. So I've been working with couples who are, just considering divorce prior to all this hitting, or in the midst of a divorce, and now they're stuck at home. And I'm not a fan of the word stuck, but instead I'd rather say, like, well, isn't it interesting? You've been given an opportunity to be at home and have this chance to really reflect and review your role in the relationship and how you want to do it. So to answer your question about the mind, our mind can play lots of tricks on us. But when we are living in that place of panic and fear, as you know, it's not good for our immune system physiologically, and B, it's not good for our relationships. Right. So I just keep helping people come back to the moment, come back to here and now.
I never thought of people who are contemplating or in the midst of divorce or are really seriously not getting along. I am very blessed, but friends, we have people in our office community, and I have friends in various communities who are under that kind of stress. And that could make things a heck of a lot worse. I think as we get emotionally hijacked, as we fear that threat to our livelihoods, to our health, to our loved ones, that just adds to it.
It does.
Let's address, if you would, how do you counsel couples who are having problems at this time? What kind of things do you suggest that they do? And while you're talking, I'm just going to check my stream. And by the way, for the first 2 minutes, you were not visible because I messed up the technology My fault. But
Oh, okay.
we can
No
see
worries.
now. So tell us how
No
you
worries.
counsel
Well,
couples in distress at this moment.
so sure, that's a huge question, because distress really is an umbrella statement for so much. You know, that we had the daily stress, the typical stress pre-corona, and now all of this added stress to whatever we were dealing with before can be
Mhm.
that much more complicated and challenging. Having said that, again, the more resources we have, the more skills we have, relational skills to be able to communicate with our partner, the easier it will be. I
Yeah.
did a couples webinar last week, and I offered some tips. And one of the tips that I offered to couples was, or is that it's really important to remind yourself that your spouse is struggling too. You
Yeah.
know, that it's very, very easy for us to get into this place of irritation and annoyance. Like, I can't believe that, she left a spoon in the sink again, or, he, whatever it is, or, he won't put his towel in the laundry room, or he's not washing his hands as long as I want him to. These are some of the things I'm
It's
hearing.
tough.
And I want couples to be able to remind them, for people to remind themselves that their partner is another human being who's having their own struggle too. And when you can remind yourself of that and have some compassion for your partner, it helps to take the irritation down and hopefully evaporate it completely.
Do you see the potential for this crisis to bring couples in distress back together if they follow protocols like that?
So that's a beautiful question. And the answer is absolutely 100% yes. 100% yes. So that sometimes a lot of couples struggle because they don't see each other, they don't have time. Okay, well, now couples have a lot of time together. So if used in a very intentional way, yeah, couples can significantly improve their connection. Again, I think there needs to be a balance. We need enough alone time, and then we need the together time.
Yeah.
One of the things I recommend to couples is to have a date night. I always recommended that. But have a date night at home now. It could be a date afternoon. It doesn't have to be night. It could be peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on the living room floor. I don't care what the couple is doing, so long as it's quality time.
Yeah. Uh, Something that brings you together in an unusual way under unusual circumstances.
Exactly.
One of the things I thought of just as you were talking to me, and we do this in our office when we want to remind ourselves of something. I have reminders on my desk in the office to think a certain way, but
Mm-hmm.
not put a note somewhere in the house saying, he, she is under stress too.
Yes. Yes.
Look at it. Just keep reminding yourself of that.
Yeah.
Isn't in education, and again, I'm not an educational psychologist. I don't even play one on TV. Don't we learn by repeating over and over again?
Absolutely. So that's a beautiful, skill that we can take into our marriages, our relationships, and relationships with children as well as a spouse. Um, you're a wonderful dentist with a long history of great experience and a wonderful reputation. I'm sure you tell your patients that they need to repetitively floss and take care of their dental hygiene. It's the same thing. Marital hygiene or relational
Yeah,
hygiene, we could say, does require repetition. So
yeah,
it's simple things, saying thank you to your partner for something that they made an effort to do, asking them kindly, giving them a compliment, letting them know that you appreciate them, that you see them in this storm that we are in, and you see that they're doing their best.
yeah.
What a gift that is for somebody to be able to say, I see you, and I see you're trying.
I see. Yes, that's that's going to help me a lot. My wife, Fran. All of our patients know Fran. I am
Mm-hmm.
here working, as you know, literally from 9 in the morning till 8 at night, doing things like this.
Right.
And
Wow.
she comes downstairs to the man cave of the Stern family mansion on the Stern. And she brought me a cup of tea. She
How
brought me
sweet.
down, and what I do is I actively tell her that you are supporting everything I do.
Mm-hmm.
43 years, you're still unbelievable. And
Oh, how sweet.
yeah, and there are things we can do. Can you address um, screaming children in that? I've seen that also. What? How?
Yeah.
How? We're past that. And
Yeah.
you're
Yes.
past
You and
that.
I.
But,
Yes. Yes.
you're older, and I'm even older. But our parents of young children, how are they
Mm-hmm.
dealing? What are the stresses that they're under, and how do we help them? Give them some stuff to do to cope with all this stuff.
It's a great question, in that, if we feel with older children that we have to do a bit of a juggling act, um, parents of young children are now homeschooling, working themselves, have to deal with their marriage, their own feelings of fear. What if maybe they have older parents? So it's everything. And so I think the best thing that anybody out there listening, single parents, married parents of, as you call, quote unquote, screaming kids. I love that. I love that now because my kids don't scream anymore.
They scream in
But
a different way.
that is for sure. I think that the best thing, though, that any parent can do is 150% self care. And that means getting outside, taking a walk by yourself, listening to music, exercise, meditation, journaling, connecting with friends, other moms, other dads who are struggling with similar things. While it's often helpful to know that we're not alone, knowing that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, but it's comforting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the more we kind of fill up our own emotional tank, so to speak, the more patience we have for the screaming kids, and the easier it is to kind of navigate through all the kind of balls that parents are juggling.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing and what you're saying is we've got to carve out some block of time during the day, whether the kids are asleep or otherwise occupied, when the spouse is otherwise occupied, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just to reconnect with our own self, to center ourselves.
Yes.
I've struggled with journaling. I've done it in streaks and then I stop because I get too busy. But I found that when I did it, and I gotta find time because the gamut of emotion that I'm feeling right now is something that I want to journal and look back on years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the power of journaling, what that does for our emotions and our mental health.
Sure. So, it's an interesting thing. I've been journaling on and off my whole life, and I talk to clients about journaling, and a lot of people will say, some people are completely devoted to journaling and find the benefit on a regular basis. Many people, however, use a journal when they're angry, when they're overwhelmed, and so it becomes like an angry journal. And I'm not sure. I mean, that can be helpful in the moment. It can be a way to kind of just blow off steam. So you're saying to your journal what you don't want to say to your spouse, maybe, or to somebody else. But there are lots of ways to journal. Two ways that I really love journaling. One is, I'm sure you've heard of a gratitude journal, which is you simply write down every day 3 things. This is the only journal entry you have to do. You don't have to write anything other than 3 words. 3 things you're grateful for every day. You can elaborate if you want to. You can keep it simple. So that's one way to journal. Another way to journal is, if any of your audience is familiar with, knows who Julia Cameron is. She's an author, and she wrote a book many years ago. She's written many books, but she wrote a book called The Artist's Way. It's probably over 25 years old, and it is a wonderful book. I actually just saw her speak last fall in the city, and she does something that she calls morning pages, where it's literally the first thing you do when you wake up. You sit up in bed, you pull out your journal or your notebook. She actually recommends a notebook, 8.5 by 11 size pages, And before you even brush your teeth, for 3 long pages, you are writing. So it's almost like whatever you were dreaming about, whatever was in your unconscious that night is just spilling out onto the page.
Wow.
Versus if you write before you go to bed in the evening, it's a different experience. So a gratitude journal or morning pages, I think, are really nice ways to journal.
Wow. Well, I would take issue with what she said because I've devolved to a point where I can't read my own handwriting. So
That's okay.
people, I think, would have a real problem looking back at it. But
Well, you are a doctor, clearly.
yeah, yes, in the fullest sense. But I've looked back on my stress journaling years later, and I found it very valuable to look at stuff that I wrote when I thought my whole world was falling apart and
Yeah,
saying, I'm still here.
exactly.
The perceived stress was real and I put on myself. But what?
Yeah, to reread old journals sometimes can be really valuable, especially if you can say to yourself exactly your point, Alan, that I lived through that, I got through that, that's over. So that, nothing lasts forever, they say. There's a beginning, a
Yeah.
middle, and an end, and it's an important reminder, especially now.
I know young parents, some young parents I know extremely well, who are struggling with feelings of inadequacy while trying to homeschool their children. They smack themselves around pretty good and express a lot of frustration. Or
Yeah.
always resort to a little bit of home tranquilizer.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Uh-huh.
can you address that, please? How do we deal with feelings of inadequacy in being pushed to do things that
Yeah.
we're not trained to do?
So, what a wonderful question. So, here's the thing: I would invite your audience to think back to a time in their lives when they did something that initially they thought there ain't no way, there is no way that I can do. How long was the plank you did recently?
Um,
6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes.
no, 10 minutes and 30 seconds.
Oh, excuse me.
Thank you for asking.
That's quite miraculous. Now, had somebody said to you a year prior to you doing that, Alan, next year you're going to do a 10-minute and 30-second plank, you might have said, you're crazy. There's no way I could do that.
Yeah.
You might have said that, and then you did it. So that feeling of being pushed, whether it's coming from an internal place, we're pushing ourselves, or we've got a personal trainer or a coach or a therapist or somebody, a fan, a spouse saying, you can do this. And then when we push through the adversity and we get to the other side, that's how we build self-esteem.
Yeah.
That's how we feel more confident.
Yeah.
So we don't have to be perfect, and we don't have to do everything fabulously well. We just have to be good enough. And quite frankly, more specifically to your question, to the parents out there who are beating themselves up like, I don't know how to do this kind of math. All the parenting literature out there about parenting, and this is pre-corona, talks about that we don't have to be the perfect parent. We simply have to be a good enough parent.
Thanks.
And in doing so, our children will thrive as a result.
Yep.
So,
Yep. I have a feeling, well, there are a couple of people I follow for mental wellness. Stacey Rose is one of them.
thank you.
The other one is Brene Brown.
I love her.
And Brene Brown, by the way, have you tuned into her podcast yet?
Oh, sure.
Oh,
It's fabulous.
it's a treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brownisms is
Yes.
imperfect, I am enough.
Yes.
That has helped me immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Understand that I'm a limited human being, but I'm pretty darn good.
Yes.
Don't we see our limitations more than we tend to see our power as human beings? And that tends to drag us down. But this perfectionism, even in our marriages, our relationships with our spouses, others, children,
Mm-hmm.
we can't allow that to drag us down.
Right. Well, there is something in the brain, I'm sure you're aware, called the negativity bias, where our brain away automatically without even any consciousness goes to what's wrong, what's not working versus what is working. We
Yeah.
do that at work. We do that in our relationships. We could do it with our finances. We could do it with our health. Oh my gosh, what's wrong? And so it's natural for us to go there and then go to that worst case scenario. But to live in that space for too long is debilitating. It's paralyzing, crippling. So I think that when we find ourselves, if we have the awareness like, oh, okay, my brain is just doing what it normally is supposed to do, and I'm living in that negativity bias, we have to balance it out with, okay, what's the best case scenario? I've just played out the complete worst case scenario. The world is coming to an end, the apocalypse, all of that. But now, what if I focus on the best case scenario? Like, oh, people are spending more quality time together, and many people are recovering from COVID. And look at all the helpers coming together. You know, Mr. Rogers said, you know, in times of crisis, find the helpers. Look at all
Yeah.
the helpers coming together. You and I being one example of that.
Yeah.
And then we can go in our brain to the most likely case scenario. So we go to worst case, we go to best case, and then we go to the most likely case. Well, the most likely case is, yes, unfortunately and tragically, many people are going to get sick and die. And at the same time, many people are going to get sick and recover. And many people won't get sick. And, you know, our finances may take a hit, and they are, and then we'll recover. That we as human beings are incredibly resilient.
Hmm. Yeah. So while you were talking, I'm thinking, as in our relationships at home, do we have a tendency to obsess or focus excessively on the negativity bias of toward the spouse? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
your friend is saying Alan is and and he does this and he does that, but for some
Mm-hmm.
stupid reason, she stayed with me for 46 years of knowing each other, 43 years of marriage.
For
Uh,
good reasons.
well, she's going to demand another opinion from somebody. But what the wisdom that I've just pulled from this is, see the positivity bias
Yes,
or the other. There's a reason why you got involved with this person to begin with.
exactly.
And what I just learned from you is, can we use this time now? We have nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
We got together for this reason.
Yeah, yes.
Positivity bias.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
And you're right too. The worst case scenario, Earl Nightingale said that 98% of what we worry about never ever comes to fruition.
Right. That's right.
And jokingly, the other 2% we don't want to talk about because that's a big. But I found that I can't remember anything that I worried about in an emotionally hijacked state that
Mm-hmm.
came true.
Right. Right. And the other 2%, Alan, is if God forbid, or whatever you believe, that 2% does come to fruition somehow or another, we'll figure it out. We'll get through. The people around us will figure it out. They'll get through that. You know, we are naturally resilient as human beings, and we've gotten through maybe not something like this before. You know, most of us, no matter how old we are, haven't seen something like this, but look at what we have gotten through. You know, 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, you know, we have gotten through a lot. And then people can look individually at like, oh gosh, you know, I got through when so-and-so died, or a divorce, or, you know, I work with clients who have lost children, just like one of the most horrific, you know, tragedies. And, you know, people find their way through. So we are really quite miraculous as human beings, what we are capable of.
Yeah,
And go ahead.
this resilience thing keeps
Yeah.
coming up in my professional circles and some of the other talks that I do in my peers.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of our listeners need to know about resilience, that quality in us.
Sure. So It was often thought that resilience is something that you're born with or without, kind of like
Hmm.
grit. If you know any of Angela Duckworth, she has done a lot of research on and wrote a book on grit. And so it's, grit and resilience are two concepts or ideas that the field of positive psychology has done a lot of work around. And what they found with both of those things, grit, like we can get through this with the right mindset and the right tools in our toolbox and the right support systems, is that both of them are like muscles that we can build over time. When a baby is born, they don't have biceps, that are formulated, right? Like a grown, adult would have. We build those muscles over time, and we can do the same thing with resilience, and we can do the same thing with grit.
Hmm.
And again, in listening to webinars and in really, so many people are talking nowadays about, I'm so bored, I've got nothing to do. Quite frankly, I don't have enough time in the day. And I think you would agree with, your own experience to really dive into all the things that I want to dive into. And I'm not just
Hmm.
talking about cleaning out my spice cabinet, which that needs to be done too. But,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about the wealth of knowledge out there that I just want to take full advantage of is everywhere right now. And then there are, musicians that are offering free concerts from their living room couches. And, there's so much beauty that we can tap into right now.
Yeah. And I think it offers us a lot of lessons as individuals, as a culture, and also as a household. Um, I think we are coming together in ways that are very, very special.
Mm-hmm.
I think for those are the families who are understanding that we need to take the lessons of the now of this crisis time and carry forward. I think
Yeah.
all couples are couples in distress
Mm-hmm.
through day one of the new normal really need to look back and say, wow, if my husband, my wife, my partner, my other can get through this,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we got something here.
Absolutely. So, to your point, I was talking earlier about the couples that were thinking about divorce pre-corona. I have had a couple of clients who were thinking about divorce and now have decided, you know what, I'm going to put that on hold, because what this whole crisis has done is it's like given us a way to kind of reorient ourselves and our priorities. It's like I was so focused on the fact that he doesn't love me the way I want to be loved, and he stepped outside the marriage by talking to this woman inappropriately. And you know what? Now I'm not saying those things are okay. What I'm saying is that we were able to, maybe, the couple, that we were able to have conversations about it. I understood I wasn't giving him what he needed. He's apologized and taken ownership. I've forgiven him. And you know what? I really do love him. And going back to like what you were saying before, Alan, about really focusing on the things that got us into this relationship in the first place. We are immersed in the positivity when we're first meeting somebody and dating and courting. So much so that we almost deny all the negative.
Yeah.
You've spoken to people before who are in love, right? And they say that the brain, I think that Time magazine had published an article many years ago that did PET scans of the brain of people who are in love and PET scans of the brain of people who are on drugs. And the brain looks kind of similar, almost as if we are high when we're in love, because, different hormones are activated, et cetera. So, having said that, when you've spoken to somebody who's in love, they're solely focused on, this person is wonderful because of this, that, and the other reason. And then a friend might say, well, that person has been unemployed for a while, and maybe they still live at home with their parents. And do you think that's the best situation for you? Yes, but yes, but yes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yes, but we only want to see the good. I'm not encouraging people to live in denial, but yes, if you're going to live in the worst case scenario, I want you to definitely visit the best case scenario and then come back to the most likely case scenario.
So now you just, I hope Fran and some of our friends aren't watching this, because now when they ask Fran, what in the world were you thinking? Stacey Rose had the right example. She was not thinking right at all.
We were all high.
Yeah. Oh,
not,
yeah.
not,
Yeah.
not so much.
Um,
Yeah.
but you know what I've noticed also, and please address this. I have noticed that love changes over time.
Oh, yeah.
High that you describe, that fascination, that
Mm-hmm.
exploration, uh,
Mm-hmm.
digging deep into somebody, that is one phase of it all,
Yeah.
the important phase. But after 46 years of knowing this woman, there's not a whole lot I can that I
Mm-hmm.
can discover.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in those 4.5 decades, the nature of love changes, doesn't it? And,
Yeah, for sure. So, a couple thoughts. It's a great question. Thank you. So, what you're hitting on, Alan, is that there are stages of love. And there's a woman, a therapist, her name actually is Pat Love. And ironically enough, she wrote a book called The Truth About Love and talks exactly about these stages. The book is probably 15 plus years old, but it's a wonderful book. And she talks about what you and I are talking about is the infatuation stage, that honeymoon stage at the beginning, but then takes people through stories and vignettes to get to the point where she describes a beautiful story of an elderly couple who were married, I don't know, 65 plus years, who end up both sick at the same time because they're so in sync with each other. You've heard of like when one person dies, then the other person dies shortly thereafter
Mhm.
of heartbreak. I won't give the story away if you want to read the book, but it's a beautiful story of how they just wanted to be together. And so what they went from, like most couples, and the couples like yourself and Fran who go the long distance, and I'll throw my parents into that category. They're married almost 60 years, my parents,
Wow.
happily. And yeah, is mature love. So we go from infatuation stage to something called mature love. And quite frankly, I think mature love is much more rewarding than the infatuation stage. Infatuation stage is lust, it's excitement, that kind of thing. But when we get to the place of mature love, where you know each other so well, you said, there's nothing more I can learn about her. I don't know if I would agree with that. So I think even after 46 years, there's still things that you can learn about your spouse because she's growing and learning all the time about herself. And you're growing and learning about yourself. So as we grow and evolve as individuals, there's so much more we can bring to our marriages, which actually leads me to another book, which is a much more recent book by John Gottman and his wife, Julie Gottman. They are, it's Gottman, they are marital researchers and therapists out in Seattle, Washington, and they've done a boatload of research over the years on marriage, what works, what doesn't work. Anyway, they just put out their most recent book called 8 Dates, the number 8 and the word dates. And literally each date has a theme where I think the first one is trust and commitment. There's one on play and sex. There's one on intimacy. There's one on fun, hopes, dreams, family, all different themes. And there are multiple choice questions, true and false questions. So you go on a date, and right now if your date is in your living room or your bedroom or your man cave, wherever it is, that's fine. And you answer the questions for yourself, and then Fran would answer them for herself, and you share your answers. And I would put money on it, if I were a betting woman, that you're going to learn things about each other that you didn't know even after 46 years.
I'm getting the book.
I would recommend it.
That's tremendous. Let's focus once again, if you would, on our children.
Sure.
And let's take children in two categories. Let's take the small children who need to learn in an undisciplined environment, or not a classroom environment where there's the teacher overseeing. Let's go to older children, whether they're on their own or not, how to shepherd them through this stuff that we're going through.
Yeah.
Little kids, school-age kids, pre-high school kids, who have to sit down now at the kitchen table or in their rooms in front of a computer, which, the technology is awesome, but it's not a human being, and there are no others around them with whom to interact. To our parents of young children, How do we help our kids cope with the stress of all that?
So it's a great question, especially because as adults, we're trying to cope ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's not like this is familiar territory that we know, like, oh, well, when you fall off your bike and you scrape your knee, this is what you do. We know what to do when our child falls off a bike. Whether we're gonna run for a Band-Aid or we're gonna let them like brush it off and like get back on the bike. And, that's familiar stuff. This is so foreign to all of us, the professionals, the medical professionals, the grocery workers, everybody's trying to navigate through a new norm. And it's hard to be there for our kids when we're trying to figure it out ourselves. If anybody has faith, whether it's religion or it's spirituality, it's a belief in God or some higher power, I find that can be really helpful. So I know that, I have some clients, the families are sitting and praying together way more, which I think can be a helpful tool. For the little kids, and maybe even the teenagers, preteens, teenagers, I'm recommending to a lot of my clients to kind of loosen up some of what might have been more rigid rules before, like bedtime had to be at a certain time. All right, you know what? That's not the biggest deal right now. Like, all right, they can stay up an hour later. So I would loosen some of those rules at the same time, and this may seem contradictory, but I don't mean it to be. There still needs to be structure. So I'll clarify. There needs to be a different kind of structure now than there was pre-virus, pre-corona, pre-crisis, so that maybe bedtime was at 8 o'clock before. Now it could be at 9 o'clock. But at 9 o'clock, and when they wake up at whatever time it is in the morning, it's, there's still a routine, and that's really important. The older kids, the teenagers and the older ones, fortunately or unfortunately, just like us, they're on social media. And, so there are perks to that. They're connecting via FaceTime and Zoom with their friends. And there are some downsides, too, because some of us, the kids and adults, are exposed to what I would say is probably way too much news.
Yeah.
Way too much news. So I would, as parents, talk to your kids about how much news they're exposed to. And by the way, what kind of news they're watching. To look for the hopeful stories versus the death count,
Yeah.
and maybe, teaching our kids some of the tools that we're learning ourselves. Let's all sit down and meditate together. Let's go for a walk together. The teenagers might begrudgingly say, I don't want to be seen with my parents walking around the neighborhood, but maybe, just maybe, they'd be willing to. Maybe the kids are baking together with their parents or cooking together or cleaning out a closet or crafts. There's lots of ways to creatively move through this.
Yeah. One of the things, again, I'm listening really carefully, and this stuff is so valuable. And I will speak for our community, an expression of gratitude for this tremendous insight you're giving us. But I want to hit a downer for just a second. And we are plagued right now with depression and, God forbid, the end road of depression, which is suicide, in young people and in our culture in general.
Sure.
By the way, that dentists are number 2 behind police officers and soldiers at risk. Yes. Fortunately, the rest of the population is starting to catch up. Our children, God forbid, if our kids are getting depressed, what things that parents can look for, God forbid, in the small percentage of the population, what do we look for in our children that may tip us off that something dangerous may be happening?
So it's a great question because, as you know, and as you said, Ellen, the suicide rate has been climbing, again, all pre-crisis, for a long time, unfortunately, adults and kids. And depression is a serious disease. So it's important, to know, first of all, that there's help, that you're not alone. There's professional help. And, some of the best, I think it's a 3-pronged approach to treat depression. It's mental health, so getting, therapy. And lots of therapists like myself are doing telehealth now and phone sessions. Medication, the physiological piece. So there are wonderful antidepressants out there so you can have a telehealth call with a physician too. And I think exercise. I think exercise is such a huge component, because when we move our body, many things change physiologically, and then it changes our psychological state of mind, and we tend to feel better. I don't know many people who leave the gym saying, God, I'm so depressed. I'm so bummed out that I just worked out. People don't typically say that. They feel good after they work out.
Yeah, you and I both started our days like that, and
yes,
I've got a long day ahead of me, and I don't care. I'm just doing it.
Yes.
Are there any telltale signs, any subtleties that the most wonderful, loving, intelligent, caring parent might miss or might need to watch for in, God forbid, their child is going down that road, is heading toward depression?
Sure. So sleep. I'm sorry?
Anything that they should look
for.
Yeah.
So changes in sleep, for sure. Changes in appetite, for sure. If they're not eating, if they have no interest in food, if they're, and it's hard to know, because teenagers can stay up late to begin with, and maybe even later now that they feel like they don't have to be in school at a certain time anymore. But I think what we've seen is like a settling in. The first week when we were quarantined, everybody's adrenaline was probably at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And now it seems like, while many people's adrenaline still may be there, it seems to me that many people have settled into, okay, at least I'm going to settle in the month of April. We're at home. I can do this. There's like a settling in. So you may notice, the parents who are listening, that their kids went from this kind of behavior to now it's like this is their new norm. If they veer from that significantly, that would be a telltale sign. If they're not on social media, if they're not talking to any friends, if they're not on Snapchat and texting and on Instagram, those are some signs. If they're completely isolated, not coming out of their bedroom, those are some things to look for. And if you see those things as a parent, please go to them and let them know that you love them and you're worried and they're not alone and there's help.
Yeah. It can happen. It happened under routine circumstances, and that's we just have to watch for that. In addition to all the other things we got to watch out for now. But one of the great things that's happened, and I want to end this on a very positive note. You know of my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Daughter is living about an hour away with her fiance, and they're doing very well.
Wonderful.
And, it's funny. Prior to weeks ago, we'd hear from her once a week, maybe twice a week.
Right.
Calling us just about every day to say hi. And
how lovely.
Yeah, and for me as a parent, we all create these backstories in our own heads about our inadequacy of parenting. And to have my daughter just checking in with us every day, it means the world. And there's some really positive things that are going to come of this, and perhaps a tightening up of our relationships.
Yes.
Will become even better if we're smart enough to carry these lessons forward once we step into the new normal.
Well, yeah, and I would say if we're, conscious enough that it's so important that we really stay in the here and now. I'm a big fan of meditation. Yeah. If anybody out there is not meditating, download one of the apps. I think the Calm app, which is a wonderful app, I think they're offering it for free right now during this time. So that's a wonderful thing. But I don't want people to beat themselves up. It's very normal and natural to lose focus. We can provide as much wisdom and tools as possible. And there are days where people are going to be overwhelmed and anxious and scared, and that's okay too. But keep coming back to the here and now. That is critically important, because here and now is all we have control over.
Yes. And I know you followed it, but earlier on this page, my dear friend, Dr. Anthony Panzolino, gave us a little demonstration of meditation. Dr. Panzolino is a teacher of that as well.
Wonderful.
And I've been fascinated with, and again, like journaling, I've really got to carve out, even if it's 10 minutes.
Even if it's 1 minute, Alan.
Yeah.
Do 1 minute. There's so much that's grabbing out, for our attention and our time right now and our energy. I don't want it to be something that you have to just, commit one more thing on your to-do list for. Know that it's there. I'm going to write down 3 things I'm grateful for today, and then I'm going to go about my day. Start with what's easiest, the lowest hanging fruit on the tree.
Yep. And even if you're not perfect at meditation, even if your first session is stumbling and bumbling and seeing through it all, it only means that it's the first time.
Yes.
Like you said before, you get better and better at it as you progress.
For sure.
So I am going to guarantee you and everybody listening that tomorrow, after my business meeting, even before, if I can get up early enough, I'm going to take 10 minutes.
Wonderful.
Going to just shut everything off except what's happening to my physical self in the here and now. I'm making that promise right now.
Wonderful. What a gift you're giving yourself.
And you, my friend, are going to text me.
Yes, I will.
And you are going to ask me.
I absolutely will be your accountability partner.
Yep, that's it. Hey, you've given us some real good stuff to ponder, and hopefully we've made some lives better today. You are in Ocean Township. I have referred to you. We have some very, I'm not ashamed to admit, I had some circumstances in my life that were problematic, and a friend and I have always been rock solid, but there have been some challenges where you have been there with just brilliance. But
my pleasure.
You have made my life better and my family's life better. So you're in Ocean Township, but you're also available on a stream.
I am.
How do we get in touch with you, please?
Thanks, Alan. It's been my pleasure to be a support to you and your family, as you've been a support to me and mine as well, personally and professionally. And thank you again for this opportunity. Anybody who wants to reach out to me, my website is staceyrose.com. That's STACEYROSE.com. Or my phone number is 732-517-1177. I will get back to you as soon as I can. And I'm doing sessions, telehealth, and on the phone. So one day at a time, everybody.
Yep. This is an awesome resource. Partake of it. I'm going to be back next week as quickly as possible with other health and wellness experts, and even with some of my own health and wellness tips. For now, I want you to wash your hands for 20 seconds.
Yes.
Be obsessive. I found, by the way, I don't know if you have, Stacey, but this product, Aquaphor.
I do have that, yeah.
A very effective hand moisturizer if your hands are starting to crackle. If you wash your hands, I want you to floss your teeth like you like.
Yes.
But you do not want the inflammation in your mouth to distract your immune system up where it really needs to be going elsewhere if, God forbid, anything attacks your body. Floss your teeth like your life depends on it. We'll be talking a lot about that in the future. Stacey Rose, thank you so much. It's always great talking to you.
My pleasure.
Stay with me for a moment, Stacey. I'm just going to end the stream.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.